Good morning, everyone. I'm John Handy, Communications Director for the House Republican Caucus, and I'd like to welcome you to our Republican Media Availability. With us today from the House Republican Caucus, we have House Republican Deputy Leader Chris Corey of the 15th District, and joining us soon will be Representative Andrew Barkus, House Republican Transportation Lead from the 2nd District. And from the Senate Republican Caucus, we have Senate Republican Leader John Braun of the 20th District and Senator Chris Gildon, Senate Republican Budget Lead from the 25th District. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Corey for some opening remarks.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, John. Happy day 44 of our legislative session. We only have 61 days left, not that we are all eagerly counting down. Last Friday, we had our policy cutoff, and we had a number of bills pass, also a number of bills not make it through, that I think most Washingtonians would be happy to see that they stopped. The one I would highlight in particular is the hospital mergers bill, which would have had a particular impact on rural Washingtonians across the state, both on the east and west side. So we're happy to see that go through. Still a number of proposals that we're actively working on that we're concerned about, especially around new taxes across the board, whether they're property tax increases, B&O tax increases, real estate tax increases, and so on and so forth. So this week is fiscal week. So we've got myself and a number of others in our budget committees looking at bills that are going to potentially have an impact both on the tax and spend side. So I'm happy to take your questions. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Braun now.
Well, good morning. Thank you for being here. Week 7 of the 2025 session. Senate Republicans remain focused on the same things we've worked on for several years now. Public safety, good news there is the bill for grants for law enforcement, additional law enforcement for local municipalities continues to move forward. We feel optimistic about that. We're working on affordability. I think the biggest issue there is what are we going to do with the overspending situation we have with our state's operating budget, and how are we going to find ways to push back on these enormous tax increases our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are proposing. So I'm glad to have Senator Chris Gildon, our budget lead, on the call with me today to talk about that. And then on education, I think there's some good news. The chronic absenteeism bill has continued to move forward. That's a step in the right direction. We got a little bill to add CTE credits for 6th graders, which I think is a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, in the other direction, we still have to deal with this bill that would remove parents' rights that passed out of the Senate a couple of weeks ago and is being considered in the House. This is a bad bill that divides children from their parents and undermines the relationship between parents and school districts, does nothing to help get our K-12 public education system back on the right track. So work to do there. But we're gonna stay focused on these items. It's fiscal week, as Representative Corey said. There's some good bills and some bad bills in Ways and Means. We heard some of each last night. I think the bad one I'd highlight is the initiative killer bill that really takes a jab at the people's constitutional right to enter into intergovernment and to democracy. It's just a bad bill with no real purpose other than to discourage the people of our state from participating in the initiative process, and that's wrong. But there's also some good bills, and I'm happy to talk about those. I'm going to stop there because I'm sure got a good crowd. We're going to have lots of questions. I don't want to run out of time. Thank you.
All right. With that, we will go to Simone and McClatchy.
Hi. Sorry about that. My audio was lagging. So good morning. Yesterday, House Democrats released what a no revenue budget would mean for the state, and I highlighted some cuts that they said would be devastating, including to healthcare, human services and early learning, higher education, etc. What do you make of that website? Were you able to peruse the website that House Democrats launched? Could you just offer your response to that?
Yeah, we spent some time looking over that yesterday. I think this is a website that highlights just how badly they've mismanaged our state's finances. For context here, I started in the legislature in 2019. In the last 3 bienniums, we have overspent our revenues by 1.9 billion, 2.6 billion, and 4.1 billion in the last 6 years. That's almost $9 billion alone in spending more than we took in. And so now they're claiming we have this big deficit. It's really just a masquerade of their reckless spending and financial irresponsibility. There's no other way to put it. We've been warning them for years that you cannot continue to spend more money than you take in. You cannot spend more, one-time monies. A great example of that is when they raided $4 billion out of our state's rainy day savings account and spent it on ongoing costs. This is the natural result of that. Fiscal irresponsibility has consequences, and you're yielding this result. And now what are they doing? They're threatening people. Well, if you don't do this, we're going to have all these drastic cuts that are going to impact your life. It's ridiculous. What they should be doing is saying, we still have revenue growth, which we do. We're just not going to do a bunch of new spending. And there's areas where we can slow our spending, delay stuff, not implement it, that would end up having take a huge bite out of this supposed deficit. But all in all, it's a website that I'm surprised they put up because it just highlights how they cannot seem to manage their financial status of Washington State.
Did you have a follow-up, Simone?
No, thank you.
All right, next we'll go to Drew from King 5.
Good morning. Sticking with the budget, I know several of you have been meeting somewhat regularly with the new governor, and he, at some point this week, it looks like Thursday, will be revealing what some of these 6% cuts that he has asked for might look like. Have you had a chance to look at that? He continues to say that taxes would be his last resort. I know that's probably the same feeling amongst you gentlemen. But do you think that's going to hold after we start to see what some of these cuts are going to look like?
Well, I haven't seen them yet. I think Senator Gildon may be able to talk in more detail, but I don't think they're released publicly. But I appreciate the fact that he's doing this. This is a proper move, in my view, for the governor, is to go back and look at the agencies and look where there's opportunity for savings that make sense in our current context, savings that make our state more efficient, but preserve essential services for our citizens. So we'll see what he releases on Thursday. I think it'll be a natural step in the discussion. I remain very optimistic that this is a solvable problem. That we have, as Representative Corey said earlier, the Washington State majorities have overspent over the last several cycles. It's put us in a bad position. It's going to mean some tough decisions, but that's the right answer, because just taxing and more money won't fix the underlying spending problem that we have. We'll be back here a year from now with the same issues if we don't deal with how we're spending money, how we're delivering services to our state citizens. So I think the governor's on the right track. We'll see what he has to say on Thursday.
And I'll echo those comments, and we'll see when they make it public, how it comes out. I know that the governor was supposed to go to DC to go to a governor's conference, but he rather chose to stay here and work on the budget, which I think is commendable. I think that's the right thing to do. I still remain very dubious that the budget shortfall, the budget gap, is $12 billion. I continue to say that nonpartisan staff, the people with political blinders, they say that the budget shortfall is $6.7 billion. So, and I continue to push that, and I have not seen the line-by-line accounting of exactly what is driving this particular budget, and I don't think any of you have either, and I think you should still ask for it until you get it.
And good morning, everybody. Just chime in on the other budget, the transportation budget. We too are anticipating some updates from the governor. Haven't seen anything yet. We're still working off the previous governor's template, which has put us in about a $1 billion shortfall. On the difference between the operating and the transportation is that ours is not necessarily driven by revenue. It's driven by the ever increasing costs of all of the various projects throughout our state that we've seen just massively increased over the last several years. So we are doing a zero revenue budget foundation right now, and but I'm sure that there will be many conversations with regards to revenue. I remain and we remain committed to looking at every area that we can reduce our costs. I think the bigger conversation has to be around moving forward. When you look at any new revenue, until we solve what's causing the problem with these increased expenses on our projects, which I would say, and many would be the regulatory environment here in Olympia that's created a lot of this, that can be directly traced to that. I also would say that the bill didn't get a hearing, but it has to be on the table that we continue the conversation around using the climate commitment funds as they are allocated for transportation. There is close to $2 billion of revenue that is directly associated with the Climate Commitment Act that is earmarked for or designated for specific usage. And I think in this time that we should be having that talk and consideration before we talk about new revenue to solve this problem within transportation. But the work continues.
Yeah, I think Representative Barkus brings up a good point. Instead of us being able to focus on what I think is a legitimate bipartisan issue around fixing some holes in the transportation, we're in this situation. I also want to commend the governor for not just initial, the gut reaction of going to new taxes. And I think the former governor put him in a really untenable spot. I mean, this budget proposed was Inslee's budget. It was so reckless that they, had to slap a constitutionally dubious wealth tax on it just to get it to work. And so the governor has been largely handicapped going into this from the beginning. So I'm going to express our caucus's commitment to working with him to solve these problems, because we have good ideas on how to right size the budget. And so that's a nonpartisan issue. Let's get it done right without the knee-jerk reaction of going to new taxes to solve irresponsibility.
Drew, did you have a follow-up?
Not today, thank you.
Okay. Next, we will go to Jeannie from KUOW.
Good morning. I wanted to ask, now that the policy cutoff is behind us and the fiscal cutoff is ahead, is there anything that stands out to you all about the cutoff behind us or the one in front of us? Some major wins for your caucuses or major losses, just in terms of legislation that is no longer moving forward or things that are still trucking along?
I'll just start real quick on the housing front. Major disappointment that we did not advance any policy or any legislation with regards to eviction reform or fixing the problem that has been brought forth by all pieces of the industry, from the affordable housing groups to the private sector. Instead, we focused on a lot of other policies to push through to try to get at the quote unquote supply side of things, which I think will be more detrimental to supply side, namely the rent control, rent stabilization bill that did come out of committee. It's sitting there now, but we proposed quite a few bills on supply. Only had, of all the bills that we put forth on eviction reform, working with landlord tenants and everything else, we only had 7 come out of committee, and none of them were related to those issues. So some disappointments coming out of the housing committee for sure. This year, not getting at the problem. We're still talking supply side issues, still talking about doing that. It just seemed very counterintuitive with a lot of the policy that came out of housing, which will be more detrimental to supply in the long run than actually fixing the problem.
Yeah, I mentioned a few in opening comments. I'll mention a few more, good bills that came out. I talked about chronic absenteeism, 6th grade, the law enforcement grants, but also we have some annual reporting for emissions that run by Senator Banky, 5036, a good Senator Gildon bill that would address this issue we have with citizens being dually enrolled in Medicare in our state and other states. It's a huge waste of money. A good example where we can find savings without hurting services to our citizens. So there's some good bills out there. Another one that reduced and eliminating the cost sharing for prenatal and postnatal care that run by Senator Mazzal came out of committee. So there's some good stuff, bad stuff. It's the stuff that Representative Barkas mentioned. Rent control continues to move ahead in the Senate, sadly. It's a bad policy that doesn't address a real problem. And we did not see nearly the amount of pro-housing bills come out of the Housing Committee that I'd hoped for. There are a few, and hopefully those will be improved as we go along. But this notion presented by the Senate Majority Leader that they're going to pass the rent control bill and a suite of pro-housing bills, I'm not seeing a suite. I'm seeing pretty small pickings, frankly. So that does not bode well for our housing situation. Other things going on, the unemployment insurance for striking workers. It's a bad bill. It's unfair to workers across the state who can't take advantage of that, but yet would pay for it. I mentioned the parental rights bill that already went off the Senate floor. There's some other public safety bills that are still alive, although in Ways and Means, so I'm not sure they'll survive there. We'll see.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to add some. I mean, I think the ledger of what we're concerned about is definitely a lot larger than what we're happy didn't pass. But there were a number of bills that have, did not make it through that I think is good for the state. There was a bill to 1445 that would create a single payer healthcare system. That's not moving forward. There was another minimum wage, artificial minimum wage hike. Continues this assault on jobs in our state and makes it harder and harder to not only have employees, but for employees to find good working jobs in this state. There was a tax on footwear and apparel for environmental purposes. I mean, that's not good for people. And then I think the two that, were of interesting note was their tax on cow farts that died, and they're trying to erase George Washington from our state flag. So smaller issues in the grand scheme of things, but hugely insightful into where their priorities are.
Jeannie, did you have a follow-up?
Just on the housing front, I wanted to ask, and this might be a question for Barkas, but do you have any sense of, I guess, what the hesitation was with some of this legislation? I guess what was the main thing you were hearing about, why these pieces of legislation for the supply side, in your view, like what did you hear from the other side about why they didn't move forward?
I just think it speaks to a broader agenda. And it started day one with the rent stabilization. That seemed to be the theme that they wanted to talk about affordability. They categorized many of these bills about supply. I thought it was interesting that we were running bills to unconstitutional, by the way, to limit an individual owner or a corporation from owning more than 25 homes, or limiting somebody from being able to own more than 200 manufactured homes or groups thereof. These are directly anti-supply, trying to go at a broader problem of affordability by doing anti-supply bills. So you can kind of see this agenda that was there. And really that was kind of the theme. The only one true big supply bill was my lot split bill that's been worked on for 3 years. And it got out of the Housing Committee, and then it stalled out in appropriations because they added a big fiscal on it. We fought that. It was pulled off appropriations on last Thursday, and then miraculously put back on appropriations and passed unanimous out. It's really the only big supply side bill that is moving right now, in our opinion, that will actually get at the issue by creating more, available land within the confines of the GMA. So just an interesting agenda. I've never seen it in my 9 years on the Housing Committee, an agenda like this come through, especially as we have been talking about for years, building upon the successes of 2022 and 2023, where we did a majority of the policy. But I was very surprised. We're bipartisan. Very surprised we didn't entertain any of the reform bills around eviction, which is probably one of the single biggest problems facing our state right now within the housing provider space. And none of those were brought up to deal with it.
All right, next we'll go to John Stang.
Hi, just a cold-blooded political question on two bills that you are opposing. The parental rights bill and the initiative bill. I'm going to throw at you, you just don't have the votes to stop them. Is there anything that you can realistically do to oppose them, or are you just going to have to go down swinging and just accept the fact that you're outnumbered?
Well, I don't think we're outnumbered, John, but I appreciate your comment. I don't think we're outnumbered because the people of the state of Washington are with us. On the parental rights bill, the opposition to that bill is over the top. Parents are frustrated, and I'm talking about Republican parents, independent parents, and Democratic parents, that the Democrats in Olympia want to eliminate their rights. Yep, well, they got us outnumbered in legislators here, but those legislators, us and the ones on the other side of the aisle, need to listen to their constituents, and their constituents are pretty clear. They don't want their rights as parents to be messed with. So I don't think we're done there yet. We'll see. If they want to continue to thumb their nose at parents, then they certainly have that option. I just wouldn't advise it. Same thing on the initiative killer bill. This is wildly opposed in both times it's been heard so far. Overwhelmingly, I think 90+% opposed. They're getting lots of feedback from voters across the state that say they're saying, don't do this, that don't mess with our ability to access democracy directly. So there's a lot more to, and you know this, John, a lot more to the legislature than just who has more votes on each side of the aisle. The people of the state of Washington matter, and if we listen to them as we should, I think that both these bills will fail to make it forward.
Yeah, I mean, this is just another year in the Democrats continue to salt on the initiative process because they don't like when people of Washington may disagree with them. And it wasn't just this year. They've added all sorts of rules and requirements in order for them to be able to weaponize the initiative system for and against stuff that they don't want. And this is just another step in it. I largely agree with Senator Braun. I think that this is a victory that will largely come for the people. We often hear about, the assault on our democracy and constitutional crisis. I mean, I guess I'm never going to listen to a lecture from a Democrat again about, attacking our systems of voting and representation when they continue to do stuff like this. So blatantly, opposed to what the people of the state of Washington want.
I am coming at you again, sort of the cold-blooded vote counting thing. The Democratic leaders are fairly firmly ensconced in their stances. About 90% of the votes in either chamber are usually straight party votes. And I've asked this same question on the Democrats on some things that they don't have the votes on. Do you have a realistic chance?
Yeah, I would say I think we do have a realistic chance. I think there is a lot of Democrats over there that believe in the initiative process. As a matter of fact, there's initiatives that they've supported. And I think that the Democrats are going to have to spend more time arm twisting some of their members to support something like this, when a lot of their members know that this is, an attack on a fundamental constitutionally protected right for the people.
Thank you.
All right, next we will go to Mitchell Rowland.
Good morning. I want to follow up on something that Senator Chris Gildon said earlier. He said that the budget deficit was closer to $6.6 billion, not $12 billion as projected by OFM. I was wondering if you could give a little bit more detail on how you arrived at that figure compared to the number that's been used by OFM up to this point.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So if you remember back to November timeframe, we started hearing that there may be a $4 billion shortfall. And then that quickly jumped to 7 or 8 billion. And then that jumped to 10 or 12. And then, you know, in recent times, we've heard 14, maybe 15. So as all of these numbers started to grow, I started becoming very dubious of what exactly is being considered inside of the shortfall. And so I reached out to nonpartisan staff in December, and I asked them to come up with the actual number, the maintenance level number of what is the shortfall. So if you take away all of the politics, you take away all of the, you know, the new spending, fancy new things, and you look at what is required to run government next year in a manner that you're running it this year, then you're looking at $6.7 billion, and that's from the Ways and Means nonpartisan staff.
Mitchell, did you have a follow-up?
Just to clarify, so that 6.7 billion, would that be spread out over 4 years as well?
That's correct.
Okay. Alrighty, thank you.
All right, next we will go with Bill from Washington State Standard.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my questions. I have two. They're on two different tax bills that are being heard in House Finance this morning. Just trying to get your perspective on each of these. One is HB 1907. It would apply business and the B&O tax and sales and use tax to storage unit transactions. And the other is HB 1839, which would eliminate a $9 million cap on the advanced computing surcharge. That's a tax that's on large tech firms, and the money goes to higher education. Just hoping to get some perspective from your positions on those bills, if possible.
Well, they're not in the Senate, so I don't know a lot about them. It is kind of crazy to me that the Democratic majorities are interested in taxing self-storage. You don't go get any more working Washingtonian than self-storage. They claim to want to have progressive taxes that get after the folks at the top of the spectrum. This seems like the absolute opposite of that. So I'm a little surprised they're doing that. On the cap on the advanced computing surcharge, this seems just plain counterproductive. This is something that's put in place to help encourage technical education. It's working. We have a vibrant and tech sector in our state. Some would say the foundation of our economy. Why, in that situation, would you want to attack the part of your economy that's doing so well? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I would argue that ag is the foundation of our economy, but that's okay.
We have many great sectors in our economy. Thankfully, we're very lucky.
That's right. Now, here's the thing. Representative Stokesbury said this quite often, and he's right. You tax things you want to have less of, right? The Climate Commitment Act was a tax to reduce carbon. Here we have a very thriving part of our economy, and you're going to increase taxes on that. That's either going to do one of two things: send the industry out of this state, which will net cost us more than this tax would collect, or two, get passed on to the consumer, which again means less money for working Washingtonians. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I would just add, I agree with Senator Braun. I think, they're, I don't know, maybe I'll use the word desperate, but I think creative. I mean, storage units, one of the fastest growing segments we've seen over the last 10 years of the development of storage units. Why? Because our population is growing. The other part is that any new building in the supply side of housing is either multifamily, which doesn't have a lot of storage, or single family that's built very small because of the requirements of zoning and everything else confining within the GMA again. So you have forced an issue where you must have areas to store stuff, as George Carlin would say. So yeah, creative way. It's another door tax. It's crazy that you would tax somebody for storing their possessions. So yeah, pretty ridiculous. But it's not out of the realm of opportunity for them. I think there's many other ones that we haven't yet even seen that they're looking at as far as new taxes within that space.
I'm pretty sure they're going to mandate we check our couch cushions once a year for any coins and remit them to the Treasury.
Well, and I'll just tag on to this a little bit because it appears to me that taxing storage units is an anti-renter tax. Because whenever you think about the people who need those storage units, you're looking at people who are renting apartments and possibly don't have sufficient storage inside of their apartment unit. So it seems like this is an anti-renter tax. And, I don't want to lose sight of some of the other taxes that have been proposed already. We've dubbed them the mega taxes. And that's the wealth tax, which you're looking at $13 billion over 4 years. You're looking at the payroll or the jumpstart tax, which could be about $8 billion over 4 years. And then you're looking at the B&O surcharge, which could be about $6 billion. To put that in context, whenever we were looking at the capital gains income tax, that was a $2 billion tax. These are mega huge taxes that are waiting out there. And of course, nobody's really talking about them right now. And I would expect that whatever proposals that the Democrats do come up with, they're probably going to wait until the last minute as a strategy in order to, keep the public from talking about it for, a number of weeks. But we shouldn't lose sight. Those are on the way.
Bill, did you have a follow-up?
Nope, that's it for me. Thanks.
All right, last question will go to Carlene Johnson of the Center Square.
John, also from House Finance today, a couple of other tax-related bills that I wanted to get your take on. One has to do with education funding, and this is 1356. So this would increase the maximum per pupil limit for school enrichment levies gradually over several years. As y'all are aware, we already fund our schools pretty well on a per pupil basis, but this would let them go after not only local levy dollars, but also increase the property taxes that the state can take to increase per pupil funding. So I want to get your take on that. And the other one is HB 2019, making the estate tax, quote, more progressive. That's also getting a public hearing today in House Finance.
Yeah, I'll speak to 1356. A number of problems here. Again, you've got tax increases on working families right now when they can least afford it. And I think a bigger problem and issue that I have with this personally is that it's just going to increase school district inequities. It was almost immediately after McCleary got fixed, we went back on equal funding for our school districts. And now rich districts can do a tiny levy and get tons of money, and poor, more rural and less property intensive districts can't do that. And so once again, we're setting ourselves up for a future lawsuit and failure. And there's two groups that are going to hurt in this: the kids and working families that are having to burden all these taxes. And we're getting to a breaking point where we just can't keep doing this and expect people to be able to make ends meet here in our state.
Yeah, I'll second Representative Corey's comments on the per pupil tax. This is a bad idea. It's regressive. It hits small rural districts. Makes it them unable to keep up with other districts in terms of funding for K-12 public education. It's bad, and it's just the wrong way. Our paramount duty is to fund education. We shouldn't be, from the state level. We shouldn't be looking for ways to allow locals to fund it from local taxes, because we know that leads to inequity. When it comes to the estate tax, it is House bill, so I don't know it super well. I know a little bit about it. I think there's at least one good aspect of it is that it raises and ties the exemption to CPI again. That's how it was done back in, I think, like 2014. That particular CPI marker expired, and therefore we have kind of this strange place in state law where it doesn't increase over time with inflation. I think that's a small good thing in the bill. But broadly, the bill takes what is one of the most outrageous death taxes in the country and makes it worse, which is hard to imagine, but that's what it appears to do. So on balance, bad bill, the wrong approach to fixing what is a real problem in our state tax statute.
Carlene, did you have a follow-up?
Nope, that'll do it. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will go to closing remarks, starting with Representative Corey.
Yeah, thank you, John. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and some really good questions. I mean, that's kind of the universe where we're looking at. And I will speak for my House Republican caucus that we are coming to the Capitol every day to fight for working Washingtonians. We're looking at every single proposal as how does that impact moms and dads, families across this state, and what can we do to reduce the burden on them. There's some bipartisan areas that we're working on, and obviously you've heard a lot of areas where we're going to be fundamentally opposed, and it's our North Star, and it's very clear what we need to do. And the good news is we've got proposed solutions to help fix Washington, address these concerns around the budget, get out of here on time and without creating new taxes and burdens on businesses and families in our state.
Yeah, I'll just add a few things. One, I want to thank everyone for being here. We're week 7. It's about to get exciting. We've been pretty quiet when it comes to the budget, but this is going to be the issue through the end of the session is how do we come up with a budget that lives within our means, that gets our spending back on a good track, and doesn't go down the road of these enormous mega taxes that are going to be wildly harmful to our state at every economic level. And Senator Gilding did a great job of explaining just how big these would be and how impactful they would be to the cost of living here in our state, and frankly, to the economic vitality of our state going forward. So this is the time when we need media more than ever. I appreciate your questions. Keep them coming. I hope you'll spend a little bit more time focused on the budget. It's not always an exciting thing, but this is the most important thing we have going on in the next 9 weeks or 8 weeks, I guess, is how do we live within our means? How do we do the right thing for the people of the state of Washington without driving the cost of living up even more? So thanks again. Have a great day.
And all right, thank you, everyone. We will be back next Tuesday at the same time.
Great. Thank you.